First contact and hidden strength. The quantum detection array hidden within Neptune's rings picked up the signal first. Admiral Helena Reeves stood before the holographic display in the Titan Base Command Center, her weathered face illuminated by the pulsing red warning indicators. The Empire's scout ships had finally reached the solar system, just as Earth's deep space intelligence network had predicted they would. Confirmation on those readings, Lieutenant Shaw, she asked, though she already knew the answer. They'd spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. Yes, Admiral. 3 Carax-class scout vessels, matching the profiles we gathered from the Centauri intercepts. They're proceeding exactly as the behavioral models predicted. Reeves allowed herself a small smile. The Empire had conquered 47 species across the galaxy, and every time they followed the same methodical playbook. Send in the scouts, assess the civilization's technological level, and if they were pre-FTL capable, mark them for standard conquest protocols. The Empire's arrogance had become their greatest weakness. Initiate Operation Sleeping Giant, Reeves commanded. Throughout the solar system, carefully orchestrated changes began. The massive shipyards inside Mercury's hollow core powered down to minimal levels. The Mars Defense Force's 10,000 stealth vessels switched to ambient temperature matching. Even the lunar cannon array, humanity's greatest achievement in weapons technology, disappeared beneath its chameleonic shroud. In her private office afterwards, Reeves connected to a secure quantum channel with General Ibrahim Rahman, commander of Earth's ground forces. His hologram appeared, showing him in the underground command center beneath the Himalayas. "They've arrived right on schedule," Rahman said, his voice carrying both excitement and apprehension. "Are we certain about this strategy, Helena? Letting them think we're practically defenseless." "The psychological profile is solid," Reeves replied, pulling up the detailed intelligence reports gathered over decades. "The Empire's entire military doctrine is built on technological superiority. They've never encountered a species that deliberately hid their capabilities. Their arrogance blinds them to the possibility." On her screens, she watched as the Imperial scouts began their standard survey pattern. Their sensors would detect exactly what Earth wanted them to see, a civilization that had barely reached its moon, with primitive satellites and a small Mars outpost. They would see cities that appeared vulnerable, defenses that looked elementary, and a military that seemed hopelessly outmatched. They wouldn't detect the quantum-encrypted communications network linking every military installation across the solar system. They wouldn't notice that every civilian vehicle on Earth had been secretly manufactured to transform into a combat unit. And they certainly wouldn't realize that humanity had spent the last century preparing for this very moment. "Commence Phase 2, Reeves ordered. Across Earth, the carefully choreographed dance began. Civilian populations started their practiced, panicked evacuations from major cities. Military units made intentionally obvious attempts to hide their movements. Every action was designed to reinforce the Empire's preconceptions about primitive species. In the Titan Command Center's war room, Reeves met with her senior staff. The holographic display showed the Imperial scouts continuing their predictable survey pattern. "Status report on the civilian defense implementation," she asked Colonel Yuki Tanaka, head of the Home Guard program. 97% complete, Admiral, Tanaka replied. "Every neighborhood shelter is stocked and ready. The civilian militia training programs are complete. We can have 60% of the adult population combat ready within hours of activation." This was humanity's true strength, Reeves thought. Not just their hidden technology or secret weapons, but the fact that every human knew their role in the coming conflict. They had spent generations preparing, turning their entire civilization into a weapon of war while maintaining a convincing facade of vulnerability. The Empire's scouts completed their survey after 3 days, just as predicted. Reeves watched them transmit their report back to their fleet. She could almost imagine their dismissive assessment. Another primitive species, barely space-capable, ready for standard conquest protocols. "Send word to all commands," she ordered. Operation Sleeping Giant is now in full effect. Maintain emissions discipline and continue deception protocols. She paused, looking at the faces of her command staff. The Empire thinks they're the hunters. In 3 months, when their conquest fleet arrives, they'll learn what it truly means to face humanity in battle. As the Imperial scouts disappeared into hyperspace, humanity continued its preparations. In underground factories, advanced weapons were assembled. In orbital shipyards disguised as debris fields, warships waited in silence. And in every city, every town, and every home, humans prepared for the coming storm. The Empire had never lost a war, but they had never faced humanity in battle. They were about to learn that humans hadn't just studied warfare, they had perfected it into an art form, and they had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Admiral Reeves stood at her window on Titan, looking out at Saturn's rings. 3 months, she whispered to herself. 3 months until we show them why you should never underestimate humanity. The art of deception. Commander Marcus Santos stood in the supposedly abandoned subway tunnels beneath New Delhi, watching as civilians methodically transformed the underground network into a fortress. What appeared to be old maintenance equipment concealed state-of-the-art weapon systems. Ordinary service tunnels led to vast underground bunkers filled with quantum-powered shield generators and electromagnetic pulse weapons. Status report on the civilian integration program. He asked Major Priya Verma, his second-in-command. Better than expected, she replied, gesturing to the hundreds of people working with practiced efficiency. These aren't just civilians anymore, sir. They're soldiers who happen to wear civilian clothes. Santos nodded with approval. This was the brilliance of humanity's grand deception. While the Empire's scouts had seen cities emptying in apparent panic, the truth was far different. Every evacuation was a carefully choreographed movement to predetermined defensive positions. Every abandoned building was being transformed into a deadly trap. In his tactical center, converted from an old subway control room, Santos reviewed the global readiness reports. The holographic display showed green status indicators across every continent. London's underground had become a maze of automated defense systems. Tokyo's seemingly vulnerable skyscrapers concealed atmospheric ionization weapons. Even the peaceful streets of Geneva masked a network of quantum-guided missile platforms. Message from Admiral Reeves, his communications officer announced. The Empire's main fleet has begun mobilization. Estimated arrival in 72 days. Santos allowed himself a grim smile. Right on schedule. Begin Phase 3 of the civilian defense protocols. Across the globe, the next stage of humanity's deception unfolded. In plain sight of any Imperial observation, civilian vehicles began breaking down en masse. Roads became clogged with apparently abandoned cars and trucks. To the Empire sensors, it would look like infrastructure collapse, the typical panic of a primitive species facing conquest. What they couldn't see was each vehicle's quantum core, waiting to power up advanced shield generators and weapon systems. Every traffic jam was precisely positioned to channel Imperial ground forces into prepared killing zones. In his private quarters, Santos reviewed footage from the latest civilian defense drills. A grocery store clerk smoothly transitioned from stocking shelves to operating a plasma cannon. A kindergarten teacher led her students through a safety drill that was actually an advanced tactical movement exercise. Every human had 2 lives now, their peaceful public face, and their role as a warrior in waiting. Commander, Major Verma called from the doorway. The Special Projects Division has completed their work on the orbital decoys. Santos followed her to a secure briefing room, where Dr. Rashid Kumar, head of Special Projects, waited with his team. The holographic display showed what appeared to be crude communication satellites. Beautiful work, Santos commented, examining the technical specifications. The Empire sensors will detect exactly what we want them to see. Primitive spacecraft barely worth their attention. They'll never suspect each one contains a quantum singularity weapon. The real challenge was making them look appropriately primitive, Kumar explained. We had to deliberately include inefficiencies and flaws. It's surprisingly difficult to make advanced technology look primitive while maintaining its core functionality. This was the heart of humanity's strategy. While other species had focused on matching the Empire's technological advancement, humans had taken a different approach. They had developed technologies that looked primitive on standard scans, but harbored deadly capabilities. In the command center, Santos received updates from resistance cells worldwide. In the Amazon rainforest, tribal villages concealed advanced early warning systems. African safari camps masked anti-orbital defense batteries. Australian outback stations hid subterranean hangars filled with stealth fighters. "Sir," Major Verma reported, "we're detecting increased Imperial communications traffic. They're beginning their standard pre-invasion propaganda broadcasts." On screens throughout the command center, the Empire's message began playing. "Attention, primitive species. Your world has been marked for integration into the Galactic Empire. Resistance is futile. Submit now and receive favorable treatment under Imperial rule." Santos watched his personnel's reactions, not fear or panic, but quiet determination. Some even smiled. The Empire's psychological warfare was designed to break the spirit of primitive species. They had no concept of a civilization that had spent generations preparing for this moment. "Send the response we prepared," Santos ordered. "Make sure it contains all the fear and desperation they expect." The message they transmitted was a masterpiece of deception, a rambling plea for mercy filled with references to Earth's limited military capabilities. To Imperial analysts, it would confirm everything their scouts had reported about humanity's primitive nature. In the depths of their underground fortress, Santos met with his senior staff. "The Empire thinks they're following their standard conquest protocol," he told them. "They expect us to either submit or attempt a desperate, disorganized resistance. Instead, they're walking into the most elaborate trap ever constructed." As he spoke, more reports arrived from around the world. In Antarctica, hidden geothermal facilities powered up massive electromagnetic field generators. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, quantum communication nodes disguised as coral reefs coordinated global defense systems. Every piece of humanity's trap was ready. 2 months until they arrive, Santos announced to his command staff. 2 months to perfect our performance as a primitive, frightened species. Remember, every sign of weakness we show is actually a display of our greatest strength, our ability to deceive. In his private moments, Santos sometimes marveled at humanity's patience. Other species fought the Empire with whatever technology they had. Humans had chosen a different path, waiting, preparing, and perfecting the art of deception. They had turned their entire civilization into a weapon, hidden in plain sight. The Empire was about to learn that humans hadn't just mastered the art of war, they had mastered the art of deception on a planetary scale. Every sign of weakness was a carefully crafted lie, every vulnerability a deadly trap, and every retreat was actually an ambush in waiting. Wolves in sheep's clothing. Intelligence Director Kira Puddle stood before the holographic display in the quantum-shielded bunker beneath the Indian Ocean, watching as thousands of green dots moved across the global map. Each dot represented a civilian infrastructure node being transformed into a military asset. Factory assembly lines quietly shifted from producing household appliances to manufacturing weapon components. Shopping malls concealed underground command centers. Even children's playgrounds housed sophisticated sensor arrays. "Operation status," she asked her deputy, Colonel James Morrison. 98% of civilian infrastructure has completed military conversion," Morrison reported. "The remaining 2% are intentionally delayed to maintain the illusion of chaos for Imperial observers." Patel nodded, her attention drawn to the atmospheric readings above major cities. The smog and pollution weren't just industrial byproducts. They were carefully engineered particle clouds that would interfere with Imperial targeting systems. Even Earth's apparent environmental problems were weapons in disguise. Update from the Psychological Warfare Division, her communications officer announced. The Empire's advance fleet has begun broadcasting their standard intimidation messages to the outer colonies. Perfect timing. Paddle smiled. Begin Operation Mirror Shield. Across the solar system, humanity's response unfolded like a carefully rehearsed play. The Mars colonies initiated emergency shutdowns, appearing to panic at the Empire's approach. The lunar bases transmitted desperate, disorganized distress calls. To Imperial observers, it looked like the typical collapse of primitive outposts. In reality, each abandoned facility was being transformed into a deadly trap. The Mars colonies' emergency shutdown activated their quantum camouflage systems. The lunar base's distress calls contained encoded instructions for the final phase of military preparations. Director Morrison called, "We're receiving the first detailed scans of the Imperial Advance Fleet. They're following standard conquest protocol exactly as predicted." Patel approached the tactical display where the Imperial Fleet's formation appeared. 500 warships arranged in their traditional attack pattern, a formation that had conquered 47 species but had never faced humanity's unique approach to warfare. In her private strategic room, Patel reviewed the latest psychological profiles of Imperial commanders. Their greatest weakness was their absolute certainty in their technological superiority. They couldn't conceive of a pre-FTL civilization possessing weapons that could threaten their fleet. "Begin Phase 4 of the Civilian Adaptation Program," she ordered. Across Earth, the final stage of humanity's transformation accelerated. Farmers checked the weapon systems hidden within their tractors. Teachers reviewed tactical protocols with their students under the guise of safety drills. Every human was becoming a weapon, hidden behind a mask of primitive fear. The quantum communications network, disguised as primitive internet infrastructure, carried encrypted messages between resistance cells worldwide. Each message appeared to be ordinary civilian communications, social media posts, email, video calls. In reality, they coordinated the largest military operation in human history. "Report from the Technological Camouflage Division," Morrison announced. "The Empire's long-range scans are detecting exactly what we want them to see. Our quantum weapons read as primitive nuclear devices. Our stealth ships appear as basic orbital debris." Patel moved to the Environmental Control Center, where Dr. Fatima Hassan monitored global weather patterns. The seemingly random storms and atmospheric disturbances were actually precisely controlled conditions designed to maximize the effectiveness of Earth's defense systems. "The Empire's psychological warfare broadcasts have reached the inner solar system," her media analyst reported. The screens filled with Imperial propaganda, images of their fleet's power, promises of mercy for submission, threats of destruction for resistance. "Send the responses we prepared," Patel ordered. "Make sure each one shows the appropriate level of terror and desperation." The messages they transmitted were masterpieces of deception, each one reinforcing the Empire's belief in humanity's primitive nature. In the Deep Bunkers Command Center, Patel gathered her senior staff for the final briefing before the Empire's arrival. "Our ancestors understood something profound," she told them. "They realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't our technology or our military might. It was our ability to appear weak when we are strong." The holographic displays showed the Empire's fleet approaching Jupiter's orbit. Their sensors would detect a solar system in chaos, planets covered in primitive technology, colonies in disarray, a civilization unable to mount an effective defense. "Every piece of human civilization has been designed with two purposes," Patel continued. "Its peaceful public face and its role in planetary defense. The Empire thinks they're following their standard conquest protocol, but they're actually following our script exactly." In orbit, satellites that appeared to be simple communication relays contained quantum-entangled targeting systems. Weather monitoring stations concealed atmospheric control devices that could transform Earth's atmosphere into a weapon. Even the orbital debris field was actually a carefully positioned network of stealth weapons platforms. 1 month until they enter weapons range, Patel announced to her command staff. 1 month to maintain our masquerade as a primitive species. Remember, every sign of weakness we show is actually a demonstration of our greatest strength. our ability to hide in plain sight. As she spoke, the final preparations continued worldwide. In peaceful villages, farmers checked their quantum-enhanced defense systems. In suburban homes, families reviewed their combat roles. Every human knew that their ordinary life was just a cover for their true purpose, to be part of the most elaborate military deception in history. The Empire was about to learn that they hadn't just underestimated humanity's military capabilities. They had failed to understand that humans had turned their entire civilization into a weapon, disguised as an easy conquest. Every apparent weakness was a carefully crafted trap, and every primitive technology masked a deadly surprise. The Empire's hubris. Grand Admiral Vexthor stood on the command bridge of the Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominion, his scaled features reflecting in the polished control panels. The holographic display showed Earth's solar system, marked as Target 48 in the Empire's expansion database. His mandibles clicked in amusement as he reviewed the scout reports again. Another primitive species, he announced to his command staff, barely reached their moon. Basic orbital defenses. Standard conquest protocol is authorized. Below him, Imperial officers coordinated the massive invasion fleet's approach. 500 warships arranged in the formation that had brought 47 species under Imperial rule. None of them questioned their inevitable victory. None of them wondered why Earth's response seemed too organized, too calm. High Commander, his sensor officer called out, "We're detecting increased activity in the system." The primitives appeared to be abandoning their orbital facilities. As expected, Vexthor replied, "Begin standard intimidation broadcasts. Let's see how quickly they submit." In Earth's quantum-shielded command center, Admiral Helena Reeves watched the Imperial fleet's approach. Every movement, every communication, every scan pattern matched their intelligence predictions perfectly. "They're exactly where we want them," she commented to her staff. "Initiate Operation Thunderstrike." Across the solar system, humanity's trap began to close. The abandoned orbital facilities that the Empire had dismissed suddenly powered up their hidden quantum cores. The debris field around Earth shimmered as stealth fields deactivated, revealing thousands of heavily armed satellites. On the Imperial flagship, alarms suddenly blared. "High Commander," the sensor officer shouted. "Multiple energy signatures detected. The primitive technology, it's transforming." Before Vexthor could respond, the first wave of humanity's attack began. The lunar surface erupted as massive cannon arrays emerged from hidden bunkers. The Mars colonies, seemingly abandoned, launched swarms of quantum-guided missiles. Even the asteroid belt came alive with hidden weapon platforms. "Impossible," Vexthor roared. "Their technology level," the scouts reported. They lied. Came a transmission from Earth. Admiral Reeves's hologram appeared on the Imperial bridge. "We showed you exactly what you expected to see. Your arrogance did the rest." The Imperial fleet's perfect formation shattered as attacks came from all directions. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves caught in carefully positioned gravitational traps. Those that attempted to counterattack discovered their targets were quantum-generated holograms. On Earth, Commander Santos gave the order that humanity had waited generations to hear. "All units, shed your masks. Show them who we really are." Cities that had appeared vulnerable transformed into fortresses. Civilian vehicles shifted into combat configurations. Every human dropped their carefully maintained facade of primitive fear, revealing the warriors they had always been. Status report. Vexthor demanded as his fleet was torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. "High Commander, we're detecting quantum signatures that exceed our own technology. Their primitive satellites are generating shield frequencies we can't penetrate. The debris field. It's all weapons." In orbit, humanity's true space force revealed itself. Ships that had masqueraded as primitive satellites unleashed weapons that cut through Imperial shields. The seemingly basic orbital defense platforms deployed autonomous drone swarms that overwhelmed Imperial fighters. "You never wondered." Admiral Reeves's transmission continued. Why a species that had barely reached their moon had such organized orbital defense patterns. Why a primitive civilization responded to your threats with such calculated precision. Vexthor watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled. Every imperial tactic, every standard protocol that had worked on 47 other species, failed against humanity's prepared defenses. Retreat, he finally ordered. But it was too late. The humans had positioned quantum disruption fields throughout the solar system, making hyperspace jumps impossible. The Empire's mighty conquest fleet was trapped. On Earth, Director Patel monitored the battle from her command center. The Empire made the same mistake every conqueror makes, she told her staff. They assumed that visible technology levels indicated actual capabilities. They never considered that an entire civilization could hide its true nature. The battle that followed would be studied for generations, not for its duration, it was remarkably short, but for its completeness. Humanity didn't just defeat the Imperial fleet, they dismantled it piece by piece, using weapons and tactics that the Empire had never imagined possible. As the last Imperial ships were neutralized, Admiral Reeves sent a final message to the defeated Grand Admiral. You thought you were following your standard conquest protocol. In reality, you were following our script perfectly. Remember this lesson. Humans don't just practice warfare. We perfect it. We don't just prepare for battle. We prepare for victory. The Empire's mighty conquest fleet, which had never known defeat, lay in ruins around Earth. Humanity had revealed its true nature, not as a primitive civilization awaiting conquest, but as a species that had turned deception itself into an art of war. Humanity unleashed. The remnants of the Imperial fleet hung motionless in Earth's orbit, their once proud ships now disabled by weapons they hadn't believed could exist. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Grand Admiral Vexthor stood in stunned silence as human forces methodically secured each vessel. Admiral Helena Reeves transported directly onto the Imperial flagship's bridge. The quantum teleportation technology, another revelation that shattered the Empire's assumptions. She studied the alien commander with calm interest, noting the mix of fear and disbelief in his compound eyes. You never asked the right questions, she said, her voice carrying throughout the bridge. You never wondered why a primitive species had such organized orbital defense patterns, why our responses to your threats were so precisely calibrated, why our evacuations seemed too orderly. Around Earth, humanity's true face was fully revealed. Cities transformed into technological marvels as their camouflage fields dropped. The seemingly primitive satellites unfurled into advanced defense platforms. Even the atmosphere itself came under humanity's control as hidden climate manipulation systems activated. Impossible, Vexthor whispered. Your civilization. You were pre-FTL. Our scouts confirmed it. Your scouts saw what we wanted them to see, Commander Santos replied, materializing alongside Reeves. We've been studying your empire for decades. Every species you conquered provided more data about your tactics, your assumptions, your weaknesses. Director Patel joined them, her quantum pad displaying the complete psychological warfare analysis. Your greatest weakness was your absolute certainty in your technological superiority. You couldn't conceive of a species choosing to appear weak, of an entire civilization dedicating itself to deception. In space, human ships now revealed their true capabilities. What had appeared as primitive spacecraft transformed into vessels that made imperial technology look obsolete. Quantum drives, zero-point energy weapons, consciousness-transferred AI systems. Humanity had developed it all, hidden behind a carefully maintained facade of primitive technology. But why? Vexthor demanded. Why hide your true capabilities? Because, Admiral Reeves explained, we understood something your empire never did. True strength lies not in showing your power, but in choosing when to reveal it. We turned our entire civilization into a weapon disguised as an easy target. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden installations emerge. The asteroid belt revealed vast shipyards. Venus's toxic atmosphere parted to show orbital defense rings. Even the Sun itself hosted human technology, with massive energy collection systems emerging from their camouflaged positions. On Earth, civilians seamlessly transitioned to their military roles, demonstrating years of training. Every human had been a soldier in waiting, every building a potential fortress, every piece of technology a hidden weapon. Your empire has never lost a war, Director Patel stated, because you've never faced an enemy who understood war the way humans do. We don't just study warfare. We transform everything into a potential weapon, including our apparent weakness. In the quantum-shielded command center, humanity's leaders gathered to broadcast their message to the galaxy. Admiral Reeves stood before the cameras, her voice carrying to every imperial world. To the Galactic Empire, what you witnessed today was not just a military defeat, it was a demonstration. Humanity could have revealed our true capabilities at any time. We chose to wait, to let you commit your forces, to show the galaxy that your empire's belief in its invincibility was its greatest weakness. The broadcast showed scenes from the battle. Imperial ships disabled by weapons they couldn't detect, their formations shattered by tactics they couldn't counter, their technology rendered useless by systems they couldn't understand. We offer you a choice, Reeves continued. Withdraw from the territories you've conquered. Grant independence to the species you've subjugated. Reform your empire into a cooperative alliance, or face a war unlike any you've ever known. A war against an enemy who has spent generations perfecting the art of victory. As the message concluded, humanity's forces stood ready. Not just around Earth, but throughout the solar system. Every piece of human civilization, every technology, every strategy had been designed with two purposes: its peaceful use and its role in warfare. The Empire had never lost a war because they had never faced an enemy like humanity, a species that had turned deception into an art form, that had hidden its true nature behind a mask of primitive technology, that had transformed its entire civilization into a weapon of war. In the days that followed, as the Empire grappled with its first defeat, they would learn the most important lesson of all. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war. They had reinvented it. They had shown the galaxy that true power lies not in the strength you display, but in the strength you choose to hide until the perfect moment. The age of imperial conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun.